Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the latest live stream. Today's live stream is titled Equipment Obsession, which I have to say, I am going to bare my soul and confess all of the things I have purchased in the last 6.5 months during my home brewing experience. There is a serious side to this, although actually it's pretty fun, is because there are a few really good purchases in there that are really quite helpful to get you started with home brewing. There are also some really bad purchases in there, a few in particular, which I would never have seen coming. And therefore, this is something that hopefully can head you off at the pass. But all of this is good being done in good spirits because, honestly, the joy that comes with home brewing is just wonderful. And as a self-confessed, sort of gadget freak, the opportunity for new gadgets is always quite exciting. So without any further ado, let's have a look at what we've got planned for this session. Well, I think I've explained what on earth this live stream is all about. Yes, it's all about me, but it's all about the sort of the things that you can buy that can really sort of make home brewing quite a lot of fun, and also, disasters and all, it's all done with the very, very best of intentions. We'll also see exactly how much it's cost. So there are a couple of quite big costs that I actually sort of scratching my chin over. I'm going to talk a little bit why 1 gallon brews is so important to me. 1 gallon brews I find wonderful, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. And then we'll get into my confession of by the numbers. And I'm a data guy, so we're going to start out with a chart and understand exactly what the issues are and how much it costs and when, and then maybe why. I'll then sort of end that with a bit of the bananarometer. These are my top 10 bananas, the things that I think, well, geez, did I really do that? Unfortunately, yes. Yes, I did. And then finally, I'm going to finish with what are the plans for the 1 Gallon Brewing channel for the month of August. What are the series that we've got coming up and we can expect to enjoy, and what can we expect from the next live stream? Right, without any further ado then, let's have a look at 1 Gallon Brewing. And why is it that 1 Gallon Brewing is something that I find so enjoyable? Well, it's a batch size that it allows for plenty of experimentation and learning. As someone who's relatively new now to home brewing, this has been a great sort of size to sort of really just try different things out. And it's been remarkable actually at exactly how resilient home brews are when it comes to sort of doing these, because despite all of the disasters along the way, everything has been pretty drinkable. One of them was a bit gritty, but everything has been pretty drinkable. And that's a surprise, honestly, because I've worked really hard to screw as many things up as I possibly can. There is also the sort of space requirement, that I can effectively do this on my cooker with a sort of 6-litre saucepan, and that's great. That's sort of the space and equipment needs are relatively small. And the good news is that even though the equipment is small and quite manual, the big brews do scale down quite nicely to a sort of 1 gallon brew. So you can do all of the same things that the sort of can do with the bigger equipment, just on a smaller volume. Which again, the volume is more what I can manage. And then finally, in terms of learning, all of the fundamentals are the same. So everything that you're sort of learning at 1 gallon level is the same vocabulary, it's the same steps, etc. at the higher level. So let's have a look then. So next is my confession. Yes, these are the numbers. Yes, in the last 6.5 months, I have spent £909 £9.84 on Homebrewing. Now, some of that was ingredients, so you know, we'll chalk all of those items up to essential ingredients, and pretty much that's true. However, you know, you can sort of see there in May something went a bit awry in May, and I'm going to go through month by month and sort of look at what is it I bought, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly along the way. Let's start then with January through to that didn't work. Let's try that again. There we go. Let's start with January through to March, and in the month January through to March, you know, effectively this was the time frame in which I did my very first kit and homebrew, and I first fell short because I didn't have a 6-litre saucepan. So one of the best first purchases I had was definitely the 6-litre saucepan that I needed. And very shortly after that, I think the next 2 purchases also were excellent first purchases. The first was a hydrometer, so I could measure the gravity, which in turn would let me measure the ABV. And as a data person, that's something that I find really interesting and to work through. And the second, when it comes to washing it all up afterwards, a decent bendy bottle brush to get inside the demijohn and clean it properly was also a very important first purchase. So, you know, during January to March, all angel faces, all good, no bananas, and if I ended there, we'd probably be winning. But it'd be pretty boring. And actually, I've been having so much fun, even with the disasters. Let's have a look at a few of those. Moving into April then. In April, I actually went out and I bought a couple of kits from the Ale Smithing Brewery, and they are great little kits. One was for the Goldsmith Honey Ale, one was for the Silversmith Session Ale. Both of them were all grain brews, all on your cooker, you know, all for 1 gallon, and they were great, very very tasty, and gave me all of the basics that I needed. Also, I started to sort of get into turbo ciders, and I sort of googled I need some champagne yeast for turbo cider, and a no brand sort of champagne yeast came up, and it worked perfectly. I do know more about yeasts now, and actually the impact the different yeasts can have. But when you're starting out, again, it shows the resilience, you know, of these brews, and actually that was really good. I also bought some yeast nutrient. It's called DAP. I'm not going to give the long hand name of that, but basically that adds nitrogen into your brew, something that yeast yearns for as it's sort of developing, and so actually that's a nice nutrient to help the yeast along. All of these things, you know, lasted more than, you know, the sort of yeast nutrient will last multiple brews, and the champagne yeast lasted a couple, so all good. I also bought some carbonation drops, and this is my first banana, because the carbonation drops are really geared up to a specific, you know, carbonation level and a specific size bottle. So if you want to actually sort of refine how much carbonation you're going to use, or change your size of bottle, then actually these drops aren't really going to work for you unless it's a exact multiple of what the level was actually sort of set. So as you learn more, you know, and actually different brews have different levels of carbonation, those carbonation drops became a little less useful. Seemed like a good idea at the time. In practice, though, my first banana. A few other things. So my first face was a set of brew bags. Now these were nylon bags actually, to sort of fit inside a saucepan, and you can sort of put your grains in there. You can put your hops in there, and it's easier to remove. They are quite handy, and a good addition. The moment is the fact that I bought the extra large ones, which will be really handy for the fruit press I've now purchased for pressing some fruit, but for boiling the bag in a saucepan they are massive, and a little bit sort of oversized, but that's fine, they work. They're just a bit big. Now, I should have put this at the front and center of my list. The most important single item I think I've bought is definitely been the auto-syphon. After the fun and games I had trying to siphon my first brew manually, the auto-syphon is an absolute joy, and it is so easy to use, so easy to set up, and just makes life so quick. And you know, if you're racking, i.e. moving your brew to another vessel, it's a quick and easy way to move it from one vessel to another without introducing oxygen, which is the key to siphoning. The reason so much siphoning goes on and it's just not poured in is because usually at that point with siphoning, we don't want to introduce any new oxygen, and that can cause off flavors in your brews. I also bought a second 6-litre saucepan. The first one I bought was absolutely great, and the second one was a bit cheaper, so I thought, whoa, I'll get that one. What a mistake that was. It was just terrible. It was a lower quality. It was even a smaller size. You know, you'd think 6 litres was a standard. Well, this one wasn't, even though that's what it said on the side. So, you know, sometimes you've just got to read the reviews. And I've not left a good one for that one. No rinse sanitizers are a crucial part of your equipment, and no rinse sanitizer granules is where I started. The only problem with no rinse granules is they have a very short shelf life. And that short shelf life means that, you know, if everything that you've brewed has to be sort of rinsed and sanitized within a sort of time frame, otherwise it'll lose its sanitization effect and you have to mix up some more. In truth, that's no big deal. You just mix up some more, but actually you end up using quite a lot of it that way. And there's another type of sanitizer, Chemsan, which I'll talk about later on, which allows you to, you know, still create a batch of sanitizer in sort of liquid, but effectively doesn't have the same shelf life, so it lasts longer, lasts you know, multiple days in fact, so that you can do all of the sanitization that you need. The thermometer, I was surprised when I sort of bought the digital thermometer what a difference it makes. I'd accidentally broken the glass thermometer, and so I was forced into buying one. But the difference it makes is the speed in which it registers temperature changes, and actually, you know, keeping control of the mash temperature is really important. And I was all over the place on my first brew. And it was much easier to sort of keep under control in the second onwards, simply because the thermometer responded more quickly. So a decent digital, well, you know, that's the one I bought was an average digital thermometer is good for, you know, that responsiveness in terms that you need for registering the temperature within your brew. So definitely a good buy. I also, you know, sort of bought some swing top bottles, and the reason why I've got a face on this one is because actually they're not the most cost effective. Now, they are brilliant bottles, they're strong bottles, they're easy to use bottles, they're crystal clear, they are absolutely excellent in every way. What makes me pause for thought though is the fact that you can buy sort of capping bottles, you know, that you put the bottle capper on the top, far more cheaply. Overall, I spent over £100 on the flip top bottles of various sizes, and I could have done it for a fraction, a third, possibly less of that cost if I'd have just gone for bottle topping. And that's the scale of difference. The bottles, though, and if you know, I don't entirely regret it because the bottles are blooming brilliant. But I think I wish I'd started with the bottle capping right from the very beginning. A couple of bad purchases though also in the month of April, and that's before my big expenses in the month of May, and that is I thought I needed some extra hose. I bought a sort of a couple of meters of extra hose, but of course I bought an auto-syphon in the same month and I've never used it. It's in my equipment store. I'm sure I will use it in the future. I just didn't need it at the time. I also bought a couple of new bubblers, and I was so so disappointed with these when they turned up. They were, I can only describe them as a sort of very murky colour. Now, they were clean and they were sanitary and everything else. It was just the plastic that was used was just not the bright, shiny, clear plastic that I was expecting. And I was very disappointed by these. And for a couple of quid more, I bought a couple of really nice sparkly bubblers, which is what I was after. So these have been consigned to the back of my store box. In case of emergency, I will pull out and use these. But the fact that they were just a poor quality plastic was very, very disappointing, and just a couple of quid would have made all the difference. I'm not sure I would have known, or how I would have known, because it wasn't like that in the picture. So this one is just a suck it and see, and unless there are some decent bad comments in there about the quality of the plastic. So May was my bad month. £245.72. Oh, ouch. What did I do in May? Well, I did everything in May. Absolutely. I really got into the swing of home brewing. So first of all, in terms of ingredients, I bought honey because I was getting into mead, and I started a mead. Brewing sugar was for various different brews I did. The strawberry flavouring and the strangely named xylitol and erythritol, they're both non-fermentable sugars, which I was using for back sweetening on the ciders. Raisins were for the mead, and various different yeasts to try out what differences those yeasts made. And actually, sort of really this was the turning point where the hobby really gripped me by the short and curlies, and there's been no looking back ever since. The thing about ingredients and a reasonable amount of the equipment is there was as many good buys as there were bad buys. So when I confess, I will confess to some good things as well as some bad. So let's see where we started. So one of the first good things I bought was a turkey baster, £3.95. That was a win, and that was simply to move the brew into a measuring cylinder so I could do a hydrometer reading. And yeah, goodbye. Also, cooling is an interesting stage, and I've never got enough ice cubes to do an ice bath. So I bought some cool packs, and these are the ones you sort of bash together, and you can put them on injuries. I just don't think I needed them. The best way and fastest way to cool the cooling stage is simply to put your pot in the sink, run some cold water, and literally whirlpool, spin the sort of the whisk around inside there to just whirlpool your must, and effectively sort of cool it down really quickly. And that works. It's very manual, a var make at the end of it, but it's a very quick way to cool it, and I don't need those cool packs. I also bought a camping bowl, first of all for storage. It all collapses down to a very small space, but I bought it in order to be able to put sanitization liquid in to sanitize everything. The camping bowl just wasn't really big enough. It was just about the same size as a demijohn, and it leaked, which doesn't help either, and just was not practical, and I needed more sort of sanitization fluid really to be able to sort of sanitize the larger items. So camping bowl was a disaster. However, it has found a new life. I now use it whenever I do a new brew to put the fermenter inside the bowl, and wherever I'm going to put it, wherever I'm going to store it. And I have had a couple of brews in the early days overflow, and they've only overflowed into the camping bowl, so it's been easier to clean up, and it's not all over my carpet. So actually, in the end, in the final analysis, that has been quite a useful purchase. Now, I need to explain the next one, because I'm never going to use these things again in my life. So when I was doing the turbo cider, I thought, right, I'm going to use a 5-litre water bottle, because I hadn't got other demijohns to use, and I thought, right, that's great, except as soon as you try and put the bung in a water bottle, the gap is too big. So it's like, okay, bung doesn't fit, I'll get a bigger bung. Laying your hands on a bigger bung, though they do exist, usually means you have to buy a whole set of bungs, and of different sizes to get the size that you're after, and then you have to drill the hole in it yourself. And I thought, oh, that seems like a faff. And I came across these adapter cones. So they effectively, you can pop these in the sort of the lip of the bottle. It makes the lip smaller, and then your bung will fit. And it is a great idea. It's an expensive idea, and it works just about okay. It took a while to really ram the bung in to make it work and fit. It kept falling out to begin with, and I'm never going to use them again. So my biggest banana by far, £16 for these adapter cones. What was a real success, and it's funny, you know, I've never used a drill quite as much as I have in home brewing, because plan B to the adapter cone was to simply drill a 10mm hole in the cap and then pop one of these little rubber grommets in so you get a nice seal, and then you can put the airlock straight into the cap. That works brilliantly. You know, and it was a couple of quid for the grommets. You can probably do it without the grommets. You can make it, you know, sort of a nice sort of seal between plastic to plastic, but the grommets just make sure you're sort of not leaking anywhere. And yeah. I drill holes in all of my bottles now whenever I'm going to stick an airlock in the top, because I use different sizes. I break my brews down into different size bottles. It lets me do that. So all in all, those grommets are a winner. So a page full of winners, and these are all things that that I think, you know, eventually should end up on your to buy list as a new home brewer. One is, you know, the thermometer strips. Now these are stick-on, so when I throw my 5-litre water bottles away, I throw the thermometers away as well, but they're so cheap it really doesn't matter, and it lets you just keep track of the temperature, because most yeast have an optimum operating temperature, and it lets me locate the brew in the appropriate location within the house to be able to sort of keep it at the temperature that you need. So those thermometer strips are great, and you'll see more of those appear, because like you just buy them 2 at a time, and I bought a few. ChemSan is similar to Star San in the States, and something that, you know, you just put a sort of 20mm into 10 litres of water, and that's your sanitization fluid, and it's great. You know, it lasts for a long time. It lets you, you know, you don't have to remix it halfway through a brew like you do with the granules. Certainly doesn't stain as much as the granules either when you sort of splash it around. And now I've got a pH meter, something I'll come to later. You know, it's you just have to keep track of the pH as to whether it's still active or not. So ChemSan is a much cheaper and greater ability to do a greater volume. It's the right answer. The next 3 I bought all together, and they're a great buy. I'm going to start with the jug. The jug is a 5-litre jug with, you know, clear measurements down the side, and I often rack the jug first so I can actually see exactly how much volume I've got, so you can work out exactly the right size sort of fermenter to put it in, or to the right number of bottles for bottling. It just gives you a good indication, and I've always been constantly surprised about how much liquid and volume you lose during this process. You know, particularly, you know, sort of through the fermentation process, but also sort of through those later stages as well sometimes. So it is good to keep track of, and some good data to help you learn. The wider, bigger funnel is definitely handy. Having 2 funnels is handy, simply because sometimes you have wet and dry. So sometimes you're pouring sort of liquids in, and then you want to sort of pitch some yeast or some other nutrient in. So having a wet and a dry funnel is quite useful. And finally, the paddle. That paddle is double-ended. So the paddle end is to be able to sort of mix and stir sort of liquids in a jug without adding lots of air and oxygen into, because again we talk about, you know, oxygen creates some off flavors if you sort of get that into the mix. But also the smaller end fits into the whole of a demijohn, so if you're adding something to a demijohn and just need to gently mix it in, you can use that end as well. So yes, that paddle is quite a useful addition to your armory. So yes, some big winners in the month of May. Some not so good winners in the month of May, though, were the demijohns I bought. Now, these demijohns, if you look closely at them, are more like the demijohns you would see for olive oil in the Mediterranean. And this is a bit of a problem because the distance from the bottom to the top is greater, and my auto-syphon will not fit all the way in to the bottom. So I was a bit scuppered with these demijohns. They're lovely quality. They are fabulous. Just they're not very useful for home brewing and racking with the other equipment that I've got. Just sort of think about that in terms of the demijohns that you buy. You'll see later on I bought a couple of more demijohns which are more traditional with the little the two sort of little handle hooks, round hooks, and those work great. The size of the sort of hole for the bung is exactly right, and the auto-syphon fits to the bottom. But that caught me out. That's probably my second biggest top banana, is those demijohns. So then drill bits. I've mentioned the reason for drill bits before. Use them all the time. Now homebrewing. So who would have thought a 10mm and 12mm drill bit would be so handy? Neither of which I had, by the way. Some cleaning brushes, always useful. Cleaning, sanitization is important. My mistake on these cleaning brushes, though, was purely the fact they were tiny, and I ended up buying another brush to be able to sort of clean things. So these brushes were useful for cleaning the hole in a sort of funnel, that sort of size, but for anything bigger they were tiny, and they were not sort of fit for purpose, despite the fact it said one was a bottle brush. I'm not sure a bottle of what exactly, but they certainly weren't big enough. I then bought some more 500 and 750ml bottles, and for reasons I've mentioned before, I have mixed feelings about these. They are wonderful bottles, excellent bottles, strong bottles, but in terms of cost and value for money, I don't think they were the right choice in the final analysis. Also in May, my final purchases, also good purchases, was a book by John Palmer, I think it is. Great book, absolutely voluminous, but actually one to go back to. One thing caught me out in this book, though. I'm guessing he was American. I'm pretty sure he was American, and you know, I started brewing all grain brewing, and the first couple of chapters were not making that much sense to me, because he was talking about malt extract instead of the malts themselves. And a malt extract is effectively is your wort, basically. It's basically dried wort. So you know, that step of mashing the grains was sort of missing, and I didn't quite get it. And mashing actually only comes in about chapter 10. So yes, that did catch me out a little bit, but it's a great book, and I'm reading the chapter again on water chemistry now. So it goes into immense detail, really good. Some storage containers are useful for two things. One is I've now got a lot of gadgets to store, and the second is it's now just the right size to have 10 litres of sanitization fluid for your sanitization, and I can put a lid on it afterwards as well, and it'll store. Those storage containers were very useful indeed. So that was it for May. That was 245 quid, and you know, a big chunk of that was demijohns and bottles that were probably a mistake. June, things went mad on the ingredients front, and this is because I purchased a whole load of grains. I purchased some pale malt, some dry malt extract, I purchased some speciality malts, I purchased 3 different types of hops. So all in all, there were lots of things that I sort of purchased that were sort of for the various brews. Now, the one thing is, of course, you're often buying these in volumes that are greater than you need for a 1 gallon brew. So it does mean you've got a lot of inventory left over for future brews. But that's, that's all power for the course. I've got enough for several brews, and it's the reason why I did several ales in a row, because I just happened to have all the right equipment. And now I think, actually a little bit of an IPA in there would have been quite nice, actually. But all being said, all of the things you're buying for ingredients are almost certainly going to be money well spent, albeit you just do have to watch dates on a few things. I'm worried about the storage of hops. I think I'm going to freeze them after my next brew, the ones I've got left. So yes, there are a few things that just have to be careful and watch the dates on. So in June, what was the equipment? And actually this equipment again was onto more of a winner. More of those thermometer strips, can't go wrong with them. A proper cleaning bottle brush. Love my bottle brush, it's fabulous. Just what you need for cleaning bottles rather than things like demijohns, and so that works well. A jeweler's scale may seem an odd thing to have added. And for 1 gallon brewing, again, we're often dealing with very low grams of certain sort of items. So 3 grams, for example, of yeast or something like that, or 7 grams of nutrient. And kitchen scales by themselves just will not be accurate enough to be able to measure at that level. So jeweler scales actually has 2 decimal places. So if you want to do 2.35 grams, if you can measure that accurately, the scales are certainly capable of doing that. So the jeweler scale turns out very handy for things like yeasts and nutrients and those smaller items that kitchen scales just simply will not be accurate enough for. Airlocks and a bung, I actually found some nice spanking crystal clear hard plastic. Love my airlock and bungs, and sort of the old murky ones, poor plastic, have been resigned to the bottom of my storage container. Camden tablets are getting ready for one of my future brews. So these are sort of going to be added to crushed apple juice once we do some apple crushing for some real cider. So I'm started by a few items, a couple on the next page, that will sort of get ready for autumn, when my sister's apple tree will hopefully give up plenty of apples and we're going to brew some real wild cider. And I'm immensely looking forward to that. What else we got? Some more thermometer strips. Yes, 3-piece airlocks. Now I did mention that sort of the ability to be experimental and use different sizes. I often do sort of break my 4.5 litres down into 1.5 litre batches, and cider was a recent example where I had 3 different flavours of cider at 1.5 litre each. Each of them needed a separate airlock still on the bottle, but those taller bottles can be harder to store because of the height, and you add the height of a bubbler on top, which are quite tall, and you go, that doesn't fit in my cupboard any longer. So these 3-piece airlocks are much more stubby. They are easier to clean, so some people like them over the sort of normal sort of bubbler. I do like the blub of the bubbler going through. They do the same thing though. You put some sanitization fluid in and it just bubbles, the CO2 bubbles through that. I bought a couple of spray guns to put sanitizer in, so you can just spray the sanitizer as you go. Citric acid has 2 values. Citric acid is useful for water chemistry and in terms of bringing up the acidity, but it also can be used as a cleaner. So actually sort of when you're sort of cleaning out your demijohn, adding a little bit of citric acid in there is quite useful. And then we come to the glycerine, or in the States I think it's called glycerol. And glycerine is something that I purchased when I was doing some experiments with turbo cider. And one of my disappointments from my first batch of turbo cider was it got the taste right, but it lacked a little bit of that viscosity that you expect from a cider. And there are some yeasts apparently that produce glycerine naturally. But one of the things you can do is add a small amount of glycerine yourself into the sort of mix. So I did a very small amount actually of glycerine in three different batches of turbo cider, and it worked brilliantly. So for very little addition, did make a huge amount of difference to the final taste. So that's an interesting addition to the arsenal. Now actually I've done a different cider where I haven't added glycerine and also had really good mouthfeel and sort of viscosity to it. So that is not a be all and end all. It's it's not needed every time, but definitely one in our arsenal to use in the future. Last few things I think in the month of June, and sort of the first is the extra wide masking tape, and this one needs a little bit of an explanation. I used to write all the details of the brew on normal masking tape and stick it on the side of the bottle, and then I sort of come across this, which is like a gigantic sticky post-it note upon which I can write all the details and just slam it on the side. So yes, this extra wide masking tape really is like double the width of a post-it note size, and quite handy for writing all the details on, and lots of other things as it turns out. So hence a extra wide roll of masking tape is in the angelic category. In the banana category, there's a syringe, a 5 milliliter syringe. Why would I buy one of those, you ask? Yeah, well, I'm thinking the same myself. And the reason I bought one of those is because when it came to glycerol, I needed to put 3 milliliters in to one of the bottles, and the closest I could get to that was a 5 liter children's medicine spoon, which was hardly a very accurate way of measuring things out. So I thought, a syringe is the way to go. And of course, I almost immediately realised a syringe was not the way to go, and actually what I really needed was a pipette. So I bought one of those, but I'd already bought the syringes. So the blooming syringes were a banana. However, while looking at the syringes, I found an upgrade to my turkey baster, and that is a large 100 milliliter syringe. Now, my turkey baster method of filling the measuring cylinder is fine, other than the fact it takes about 20 goes to get enough liquid out of the demijohn and into the measuring cylinder. I can now do it in one draw using my 100 milliliter syringe. So in terms of speed, this is massive upgrade to the turkey baster, and the turkey baster has been resigned to now basting turkeys. So a good addition there. Finally in June, a few other things, and this is where I finally relented and purchased some crown caps, a capper, and some crown bottles. And 12 330 milliliter bottles were like £7.95. I mean, it was like a fraction of the cost of those swing tops. So I think I just made a bit of a boo-boo on that one. I also bought 2 decent demijohns, this time of the right type that an auto-syphon would fit through, and all of these I bought from the Homebrew hop shop, who did a brilliant service and delivered them via a courier that actually waits at your doorstep and makes sure you pick them up and takes them in, unlike some of the dubious couriers that sort of leave things at random locations for people on the street to walk by and pick up. So yes, sort of excellent courier service, excellent service all around, and excellent quality, certainly on the front of the demijohn. Now, interesting one on here is the cider hydrometer. Now, I did not buy the cider hydrometer because I was brewing cider, because actually normal hydrometer was fine. I actually bought the cider hydrometer because the numbers on it were bigger. Yes, my ability to read the numbers on a hydrometer is a pain in the bottom, as I'm there with my glasses, and in the end I take a photograph and just look at the photograph. And I thought, I know I'm going to buy one with big print on, except for the very first time I got to use my cider hydrometer, I discovered a problem, and that problem was the fact it only goes down to 1.000, and actually what I'd brewed at the time was all the way down at 993 or something like that. So my cider hydrometer was no good whatsoever, because I did not realize the scale on it was different. Um, so um, for original gravity readings, it's great. Perfect eyesight, perfect visibility for my eyesight. For final gravity readings, hit and miss depending on what your final gravity is going to be. Now we're almost at the end and into July, and a couple of mentions about ingredients in July is I'm brewing a seltzer, and that involved distilled water. It involves some Kvike yeast, which I'm really looking forward to. That's yeast on steroids to the rest of us. I mean turbo yeast, and some special nutrient for a seltzer. So that's in the fermenter at the moment and going really well. And also planning ahead, there's some roasted barley and some flaked barley. That is for a stout that I want to brew in a couple of brews time. So getting stuff ready for that. So again, building up my inventory, all is good. I do think, and I will add up the numbers at the end when I do the videos for this one, but I think the seltzer may be one of the most expensive drinks I've done, despite the fact it's effectively water, sugar and yeast. Who'd have thunk it? Also in July, and I haven't assembled it yet, I bought a fruit press. Yes, I'm getting ready for those apples. I'm getting ready for that real cider. I've got some more brown bottles ready for my brews. I've bought another demijohn because the demijohns are so good from that place. And I bought a bigger bottle of Kemsan because I only bought a little one to try first time around. I also added another gadget to my list, which is a pH meter. And the reason for doing that is a fewfold. One is measuring the pH has been a bit more important on the seltzer, where if the pH crashes down too low, it'll stop the fermentation. So far so good, that hasn't happened. But also, actually, I'm starting to learn more about water chemistry and some of the chemicals for water chemistry. And I think the next beer I do, I'm actually going to start with the distilled water, add the water chemistry in and build it up from there. So I'm looking forward to doing that because that's a completely different approach. I've evolved my water approach. I used tap water on the first few, and I think some of the problems could have related to that. I've used bottled water since, and that's worked okay. So far so good. And but now I think it's stepping it up a gear and understanding more about water chemistry. So that's my next learning objective, and a pH meter is on the list for doing that. So that's pretty much it. That's my good, the bad, and the ugly for the last 6.5 months of my my home brewing experience. And so here's my final bananarometer. As you can see, the bananas are in the yellow, as you would expect, and April was probably my biggest banana month, reducing slightly in May and improving further in June. So my ability to really sort of pick a ripe banana is managing to improve, and I'm sort of purchasing many more items that are in the angelic side of the camp. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I think you know the two that I hate the most. Those lovely but unpractical demijohns are top of my list. I hate those horrible murky plastic bungs, and I'm never in a million years going to use those bung adjuster cones ever again. And I should imagine there'll be a situation in the future where I use one and I'm going to go, nah. But until then, I hate them. I hope that's an opportunity to avoid some of those things, but more importantly, I think to spot the things that probably are useful along the way. So before I finish, I'm just going to talk a little about what's coming up on the channel in the month of August. And during the month of August, there's a series running right now that is the Turbo Cider Take 2. And this is where we started to add the glycerine in. I think that was the Take 2. Oh no, the Take 2 was the one that went completely wrong. So that's running right now. Then going to start the Silversmith's Session Ale, and that's we taken that all the way through to tasting. That one's all finished now. I think I've got one bottle of that left. So we've got that during August. And then turbo cider version 2, that's the one with the glycerine. So we sort of see how that's worked out, and the effect, that really positive effect that had. So that's the schedule. And if you've not looked at the website before, then there we go. For some reason the website wasn't showing, but hopefully we can share it now. There we go. The wonders of technology. Part of the reason I'm doing these is to learn some of the wonders of this technology. So if you've not looked at the website, then effectively the website's broken down into lots of playlists, and each playlist has the different sort of episodes, and each episode are the various stages of a typical brew. So we'll go through the mash and the boil, sort of the fermentation, racking, siphoning, bottling, all the way through to testing, as you can sort of see here with the Goldsmith's Honey Ale. And if I do the same on the recent turbo cider, again you can sort of see the preparation, fermentation, racking, a little bit of an aside on some other things, and then bottling and tasting. So that's a pretty standard format for each of the brews as they go up. And the one that's in progress right now is this homebrew number 4, the really simple turbo cider, when things go wrong. Also, you can access from here is my Medium sort of page, and the Medium page is just 1 gallon homebrew articles. I've recently started that, but please do take a quick look and subscribe, clap, and everything else that goes along with typical social media things, because you'd make me very happy. So that's the plans for the channel in August, and also in August is the next live stream. So August the 14th is the date planned for that, and sticking with it's not entirely a serious set of sort of live streams that we're running here. The next one is going to be called The Homebrew House of Horror Presents Fermentation Problem Diagnosis. Yes, I've had a catastrophe, and these are all the steps I should and shouldn't have done as I went through that diagnosis of the problems, and I'm going to share that with you next time. So thank you everybody for listening and sticking with me. A few technical problems at the beginning meant I started a bit late, but if you're watching this on the recordings, then you won't have noticed that, so that's all fine. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you have a giggle, because it's not entirely meant to be precisely serious, but also I hope there's a few takeaways there for your own homebrewing experience. So thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely evening, and I'll speak to you again soon.